Kate Winslet held her breath for over 7 minutes underwater filming the new Avatar film. Sigourney Weaver did 6.5 minutes, which is also amazing. And years ago, you might have heard of Tom Cruise holding his breath underwater filming Mission Impossible. He went over 6 minutes as well. Hey, my name's Lucas. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a yoga breathing coach. I have lots of certified teachers all around the world. I've been getting lots of inbound emails about this Avatar movie, and people are asking, how are these people doing this? What techniques are they using? And how, if anything, can we incorporate this into our practices? Thought I'd make a short video for you today. Here's what we'll talk about. Number one is how breath holding works, meaning oxygen, CO2, mammalian dive reflex, all of the different things going on. Number two is how these actors most likely accomplish this. And lastly, we'll talk about some takeaway ideas. Before we get started, really important disclaimers. Please never, ever practice breath holds in water alone. That means do not fill up your bathtub and put your face down. Don't fill up a bowl of water and stick your face in it. Don't go in a lake or a river or the ocean or the sea alone. It's really dangerous. There are shallow water blackouts, meaning people passing out in their bathtub, in swimming pools, in the ocean, every single month. And both amateur and pro athletes are dying on a regular basis. It's a really, really silly way to die. Please don't do it. Stay away from water unless you're with a partner and unless you have proper training, ideally with like a free diving professional. Okay, let's talk about breath holding. How does all this stuff work? What happens when you hold your breath? Are these actors now having brain damage? Probably not. Here's what you need to know. Let's first think about ambient air, which is like the air here in this room or the air in your room, and the oxygen percentage. So if we were to take a unit of air, let's say we had a sphere like this, it's about 21% oxygen, about 78% nitrogen, and then about 1% other stuff like carbon dioxide and argon and some other miscellaneous gases. So about 78% nitrogen, a whole bunch of nitrogen, 21% oxygen. A typical breath, like when you're just hanging out watching videos, is around 200 to 300 milliliters, like a small water bottle in volume. So, and in that, let's call it a 300 milliliter breath, your body only utilizes about 25%, maybe 30% of the breath that you take in terms of the oxygen. So that means the majority of the oxygen that you breathe in, you breathe right back out. So even though there's only 21% oxygen in your room, in my room, it's way more than enough. This is relevant for breath holding because if you just hold it in, there's more than enough oxygen for you to hold your breath comfortably for 1 to 2 minutes without any kind of physiological risk or danger. However, it will be uncomfortable, and that discomfort comes from carbon dioxide, from CO2. If you forget everything from this video, it's really important that you remember this, both from a practice and a safety perspective. You need to understand that it's CO2 increase that triggers breath hunger, not a decrease in oxygen. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is your blood oxygen levels can go really, really low, but if your carbon dioxide levels are also low, you won't feel it. And this is how people pass out in their bathtub. Conversely, if your CO2 levels go really, really high, like if you're swimming frantically in a pool, even just for 10 seconds, you'll be starving for air. Breath hunger is triggered by CO2 up, not by oxygen down. It's very, very weird, and understanding that is really crucial to understanding how breath holding works. And the reason that you get uncomfortable right now when you hold your breath is simply because you're not that comfortable with CO2, with carbon dioxide. When it comes to breath holding, there are really a handful of different techniques and practices you need to understand that people like movie stars, people like yoga students, people like free divers and snorkelers and spear fishermen utilize to adapt their body to the sea or to the lake or to the swimming pool to make themselves better breathers. And the biggest one, the most important one, comes back to CO2, and it's called CO2 tolerance. And this is very specifically your ability to tolerate that increase in CO2 without panicking and gasping for air. How do you increase your tolerance to CO2? Repeated exposure and practice is really what it comes down to. Let me give you a simple example that'll help you understand how this works. Let's imagine you're 10 years old and it's your first time your parents leave you alone at the swimming pool. You're with your friends, you go to the deep end, and it's 12 feet deep. And one of your friends encourages you and says, hey, go swim down to the bottom, and they throw one of those swimming rings down to the bottom. You say 12 feet, that's nothing. I can do that. And you dive in, you swim down, you pick up the ring, and literally you've been underwater for about 4 seconds and you feel just this crazy breath, hunger, panic. You look up, you swim up and you gasp for air and you hold onto the side. You're convinced you almost died, you almost drowned, but you were underwater for a total of 7 seconds. Anybody, including a brand new infant, can hold their breath for 7 seconds. So what happened? Well, 2 things happened. Number 1, your CO2 tolerance as a 10-year-old who's new in the water is very poor, meaning the slightest feeling of CO2 makes you panic. And number 2 is you were very inefficient with your movements, because at 10 years old, you're not a great swimmer. So you're flailing around with your arms and your legs, and that inefficiency from a muscle perspective is also throwing off a lot of CO2. Bunch of CO2 and you're not ready for it. Let me give you another example outside of breathing. It'll help you understand. Let's say that same 10-year-old at lunch, your friends convince you to order a cup of coffee, and you say, my parents said I shouldn't have coffee, but you have one anyway. And at 10 years old, that first cup of coffee makes your thumb twitch. Maybe you can feel your heartbeat in your eyelid and you're buzzing for a long time. Well, by the time that same 10-year-old is 20 years old and drinking coffee every day, coffee doesn't do much. And eventually, maybe you'll drink a cup of coffee and fall asleep and take a nap. When you become caffeine adapted, it doesn't have the same effect. Our body's able to build up tolerance to all kinds of things, and similarly, it can build up tolerance to CO2. That 10-year-old hangs out at the pool and again in the afternoon starts practicing swimming down, swimming up, swimming down, swimming up. That 7-second breath hold time can very, very quickly turn into 30 seconds, 45 seconds, even for a 10-year-old kid. Your CO2 tolerance can grow really, really quickly. So anyone who's serious about breath works on increasing their tolerance with a little bit of discomfort that comes from CO2. The next practice for people doing breath holding specifically, whether that's yoga students or freedivers, spear fishermen, or movie stars, is hypoxia exposure, or hypoxia tolerance really. And this is getting comfortable with your blood oxygen level dropping. When your blood oxygen level drops, sometimes you can feel a little dizzy, you can see stars, you can feel a little wobbly, a little confused. Eventually, of course, you'll even pass out. For somebody who's new to hypoxia, to low blood oxygen, you might quite literally see stars and black out or have to sit down very, very quickly. Whereas someone who is trained with hypoxia exposure, hypoxia tolerance, they might be able to hold their breath for 5 minutes without seeing any stars, any blackout, or anything at all. And so in the same way we can build up CO2 tolerance, we can also build up low O2 hypoxia tolerance. So again, imagine the swimming pool. It's now the end of the summer. That same 10-year-old who panicked at 7 seconds can now swim down to the bottom of the pool and spend 1 minute and 15 seconds picking up various rings, putting them on his arm, swimming back up. No gasping, no panicking, nothing at all. This is an adaptation response that comes through practice. The next technique, which that same 10-year-old will tap into right away, is called the mammalian dive reflex. This is a very, very interesting nervous system response that we've inherited from our caveman ancestors or our amphibian ancestors. And essentially any mammal, we are mammals, when you get in the water, your nervous system has a very interesting response where everything slows down. Your heart rate, your circulation, all the blood gets focused around your vital organs. Essentially your metabolism goes zoom. And all of this is in service of 2 things, right? To produce less CO2, because there's less movement, less activity, less metabolism, and to conserve oxygen. It's a survival thing, so you don't die in the water. So this is why all of the record breath holders, they're underwater. In fact, you'll see people doing static apnea where they're holding their breath, and you'll see this on YouTube where people are just flat in the pool. You go, what are they doing? They just lay belly down in the pool. The mammalian dive reflex is so strong that for many people, they'll double the length of their breath holds just by being in water. This is where people get into trouble. This is where people fill up their bathtub and do bad things. Don't do that. There are ways you can tap into your mammalian dive reflex without risking your life. You can splash water on your face and your cheeks and especially on the sides of your neck. You can practice Jalandhara Bandha. This is a yoga breathing hand position that can help to moisturize your sinuses and your nostril and again trigger that dive reflex. It's not nearly as strong as being in water, but it's an approximation and it's worth utilizing in your practices. The next technique that somebody on a movie set, somebody who's spearfishing or free diving, somebody who's snorkeling will very often employ is some type of relaxation technique. That might be mindfulness, visualization, meditation. Often you'll see people floating on their back with their eyes closed, and what they're attempting to do is, similar to the mammalian dive reflex, calm their body down, conserve energy. So they use less oxygen and they produce less CO2. A 2-minute meditation before a dive is a very, very common practice to conserve energy. Even scuba divers, who of course have oxygen, they still do a lot of guided and visualization techniques to relax and conserve air so they can stay down longer. So those are techniques that people are often utilizing. And then we get into some tricks. And the tricks are potentially a lot more risky and is where people get into trouble. The first trick that people will use is controlled hyperventilation before a dive or a breath hold. And what that looks like is and what happens here is, because I'm breathing faster, I throw off CO2 at a really high rate. And so if I throw off CO2 and then I take a big breath, there's a lot less CO2, which means I'm going to have way less breath hunger. This will allow me to hold my breath longer. Well, you say, well, that's good. Why don't we all do that? Well, the problem is you can accidentally hold your breath too long and pass out. But controlled hyperventilation is a controversial practice that people certainly do use. And if you're trained in breath holding and you have a partner and you're doing things carefully, it can be really helpful. The next technique that people use, which is a pretty obvious one, a 10-year-old at the side of the pool would use this, but it's called packing. And what packing is to basically, it's a super inhale. And it's not so much about expanding your lung capacity, but really expanding the volume of your thoracic cavity. Free divers and people who are really competent at breathing, they actually have a tremendous thoracic capacity. They get a lot of flexibility and mobility in their intercostal muscles, their accessory muscles of their chest and their upper back, and they're able to create negative volume for your lungs to fill, and they can literally take in more air. We talked before about an average breath being 300 milliliters. Well, many people can pack double that, or maybe even more. And so if you're taking in more volume of air when you're holding your breath and you're swimming for those rings at the bottom of the pool, you have more air, more oxygen to draw from. That's packing. Finally, we get into a technique which most people don't know about and it's not very intuitive, and this is using supplemental oxygen. Sometimes people will use pure oxygen. Very often they use something called nitrox, which is a nitrogen-oxygen mix that's not natural. So the natural air, let's say 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen in a nitrox mix. Maybe they'll have people use different mixes, and there's a whole science/bro science chemistry to this that is very sophisticated. But somebody might use, for example, 40% oxygen, so let's say double, and then 60% nitrogen, maybe even 50% oxygen, 50% nitrogen. On a really basic level, what you're doing is you're doubling or more the oxygen per breath. So that same 300 milliliters of volume suddenly has double the amount of oxygen, double the amount of oxygen, double the amount of time. Combine that with packing, combine that with mindfulness, combine that with CO2 training, combine that with hypoxia tolerance, and very, very quickly you can see how somebody can hold their breath for a long period of time. Okay, so we've talked about all the different techniques that people use, some of which are safe, some of which are risky, some of which are obvious, some of which are kind of weird and you need a oxygen supplier to be able to do. What did Kate Winslet do? What did Sigourney Weaver do? What did Tom Cruise do? Almost certainly, they did almost all of these techniques. Make no mistake, to hold your breath for over 5 minutes, even over 4 minutes, this is really uncomfortable, and this is a significant feat. No matter who you're training with, who you're coaching with, these actors are committed to their craft. This is difficult, and it's very, very uncomfortable. But probably for at least 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even longer, these actors were working with a freediving coach, and almost certainly they were working on CO2 tolerance, hypoxia tolerance. Absolutely, they were working on mindfulness, meditation, calming techniques. They might have been using some controlled hyperventilation, really unclear. They were using the mammalian dive reflex, obviously they were doing this in water. And almost certainly, without a doubt, they used some kind of nitrox mix. So they were packing in a big breath before they went down of highly concentrated air, and that allowed them to stay under longer. Keep in mind also, in the scenes that they were filming, they were moving around. When you move, you create more CO2. This would be almost impossible for a non-senior level freediver to do without some kind of supplemental oxygen. Okay, so interesting. This is what they did, probably how they accomplished it. And again, regardless of what they did or didn't do, this is really quite impressive. What is not impressive is that they're not disclosing this to the public. So Kate Winslet and the producers of the film, they're using this as a selling point to get free media to promote their film. This is not a good idea, and I'll tell you why. Right now, there are thousands of young people who are filling up their bathtub and trying to match the breath hold times of Tom Cruise and Kate Winslet and Sigourney Weaver. They're their heroes, and they're trying to do this in their bathtub. This is really, really dangerous. So it's great that they did this. It's impressive that they did this. I think it's wonderful, but they need to put a big asterisk, which is don't try this at home. So what are the takeaways for you? The takeaways for you are, number one, you have to really get your priorities straight. Are you trying to do breathing for nervous system balance, which is what I teach? Or are you trying to catch fish like a spear fisherman or win awards like freediving competitions? All of those things have a time and a place, but if your goal is nervous system balance and nervous system modulation, controlling your stress response, all of these techniques that are pushing past, let's say, 2 minutes are way too extreme, and they have nothing to do with anything that you should be looking at except with reverence and awe and the Hollywood spectacle of it all. The second thing you need to realize is if you do have goals like spearfishing and catching fish, action sports underwater, or winning awards as a freediver, you need to be really, really careful. What you're seeing here is an anomalous situation. What you're seeing here is a highly supervised situation. And you're also seeing a situation in which a shallow water blackout is not just likely, it's probable. And what this means is any experienced freediver, they end up having shallow water blackouts, meaning they quite literally go unconscious underwater. They surface and their breathing partner, their diving partner, resuscitates them. This happens, it's terrifying if you don't know what you're doing. And so if that is what you're pursuing, please be extra, extra careful and go seek out help. I do want to mention that freediving gets a really bad name. Freediving is actually a very safe sport, similar to skydiving. You look at it and it seems really, really dangerous. But if people are practicing properly with trained professionals, it's actually really, really safe. Spear fishermen, on the other hand, they get into a lot of trouble because they're fishing alone and because of the action nature of what they're doing underwater. Very often they overextend and they can get into a lot more trouble. The deaths that you see with breath holding are almost never in freediving controlled situations, except for the extreme stuff. It's almost always amateurs messing around, holding their breath in a swimming pool, holding their breath in a bathtub. So you need to be careful. Hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like more science-based yoga videos, hit subscribe down below. You can find my online teaching calendar. I don't teach free diving or extreme breath holding, but I do teach breathing for nervous system balance, stress modulation, better sleep, improved digestion. You can find my complete teaching schedule at yogabody.com. Your questions, comments, and feedback are always most welcome down below, and I'll see you in the next video.